to you about this my presentation, just make a note of it, and I'll try to address them at the end. I want to take myself off this screen here. You don't need to see me. And I want to share my slides with you. Okay. When the Central Library's Rundle Memorial Building was opened in 1936, the children's room on the second floor included a very special feature. It was a story hour room that was a secret room, entered through a door hidden in the wall. And for hundreds of children who visited the library, it was a magical place. And then in 1940, it became even more special with the donation of about 160 dolls from around the world, collected between 1935 and 1938 by the students and teachers at Rochester's Theodore Roosevelt School number 43 through a doll exchange program with other countries. And here you can see some of the dolls on display in the early years. When the Bausch and Lomb Public Library building was opened in 1997, the children's department left the Rundle building and we moved to the second floor of the new building, and the doll collection moved into the Children's Center's new secret room. This year, it moved, as Nancy said, once again, and most of it can now be found displayed in the Arts and Literature Division on the first floor of the Rundle Memorial Building. Today, I want to share with you the story behind the doll collection, how school number 43 collected the dolls, some of the details about individual dolls, and what has happened to the dolls since the library received them. Now, I know almost nothing about dolls as collectibles, and the collection has never been viewed that way by the school or the library. So my talk today focuses on the collection as an inspiring project to connect the children of Rochester and the world in friendship at a time when there was less and less goodwill in the world. In August 1934, Adolf Hitler had assumed the presidency of Germany and began using the title Der Führer. In October 1935, the month before number 43 school began its doll exchange program, Italy invaded Ethiopia. In March of the following year, Germany invaded the Rhineland. 4 months later, the Spanish Civil War started, and in August, Joseph Stalin began his great purge in the Soviet Union, imprisoning, sending to labor camps, or executing approximately 8 million people. 1938 saw Germany invading Austria in March, and in November, Kristallnacht took place, 24 hours of terror that marked the systemic persecution of Jews in Germany and Austria. And then in 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and World War II began. The doll exchange program at Theodore Roosevelt School number 43 was conducted under the leadership of the principal, George W. Cooper. He was a man who believed strongly in the importance of international understanding. And when the library received the dolls, it named the collection in honor of Mr. Cooper, to recognize his tireless efforts over the course of several years to bring this project to fruition. Along with the dolls came most of the original correspondence relating to the collection. In 1990, the Children's Room held a 50th anniversary celebration of the gift of the dolls to the library. And at that time, we were lucky enough to make contact with several former students and teachers who had been at number 43 school during the time of the doll exchange. And their memories helped to flesh out for us the details of this extraordinary program. George Cooper was born in 1892 in Pennsylvania, and he grew up there. In 1912, at age 20, he moved to Rochester, where he became principal of Penfield High School, at the time, the youngest principal in New York State. He subsequently served as principal of several Rochester schools, including Theodore Roosevelt School number 43, where he spent the longest years of his professional career from 1920 to 1940. The school was at the corner of Lyle Avenue and Mount Read Boulevard. This is a photograph of the school in 1935, the year that the doll exchange program began. Today, the building is still part of the Rochester School District, although it's no longer used as an elementary school. In later years, George Cooper recalled that during the Great Depression, the neighborhood surrounding the school, in his words, was a blighted one. It was hard on the children, he said. They had to depend on the school for many of their needs. To aid his students and their families, Cooper organized soup kitchens and clothing drives. I used to go home with many a heartache, he remembered. Many of the former students that we spoke to in 1990 had fond memories of Mr. Cooper, and one of them observed that he was held in very high regard by the parents of the school. In 1934, number 43 school was a kindergarten to 8th grade school with over 1,000 students. And in that student body, many of the children were the sons and daughters of parents who had emigrated from other countries. Cooper discovered that 27 different nationalities were represented at the school, all, as he wrote in a letter, trying to become better American citizens. He went on to say, our first venture in the direction of international goodwill was the realization that every nation has a definite part to play in this world of ours. And so to promote the spirit of goodwill, the school included various activities in the curriculum and presented a play called The Great Melting Pot. Soon, according to Cooper, the parents of the neighborhood and the school decided to make some contact with the different countries of the world. And in 1935, the idea of a doll exchange program with other countries was born. One former student remembered that Mr. Cooper liked to have students vote on things, and that he had the students vote on whether they wanted to trade dolls with children in other countries. According to George Cooper, there were then 69 countries in the world. And on November 7th, 1935, he sent the following letter to the ministers of foreign affairs in those countries. Gentlemen, Theodore Roosevelt School number 43 of Rochester, New York, USA, has in its school population over 1,000 children. And in that large group of boys and girls, there are 27 different nationalities. In our assembly hall, where all the children meet from time to time, there hangs a large flag of your country. It is our desire and purpose to have the flag of the native land from whence these children came before them as an overture of loyalty and love of mother country. This letter, addressed to their native countries at this time, has a twofold purpose. First, as an expression of loyalty, and secondly, with a very definite request in mind. The request is this: would it be possible for someone, either an organization or a school group, to send to us a doll of the type your boys and girls play with as children, dressed in native costume? It is our purpose and desire to place this doll as a permanent exhibit, showing to our children that it came from your country and from your boys and girls. I realize this request is rather unusual, but the thought occurred to us that we might reciprocate in a similar manner. That is, by sending a doll from the boys and girls of Theodore Roosevelt School to the boys and girls of your country. For this unusual request, and for whatever good it may bring forth, we most sincerely thank you. As their part of the exchange, the school decided to send a Shirley Temple doll, which had just been introduced by the Ideal Toy and Novelty Company the previous year. Shirley Temple was at the height of her film career, and the doll had become immediately popular in the United States. A former teacher at the school said that besides its popularity, the doll was also within the price range of the school. There was no example of the doll that Theodore Roosevelt School had sent around the world when a children's librarian joined the staff of the Children's Center and realized that no one could see the doll that had been used in the exchange. And so she donated in 1962 her own much-loved Shirley Temple doll, and this is that doll. Many of the teachers at the school donated money to help purchase Shirley Temple dolls. But in addition, the school launched a major money-raising project in which students sold 1-pound boxes of salt. Now, today, when we're used to students selling candy or popcorn or magazine subscriptions, and of course, Girl Scout cookies, selling 1-pound boxes of salt sounds like a project destined for failure. But in the 1930s, of course, boxes of salt were a very important public staple. Most households use a lot more salt than we do today, especially in canning. And it was apparently a very good money-raising project. Several former students remembered the project vividly. One student recalled bringing her wagon to school on Fridays to pick up her boxes of salt to sell. There was a chart that was hung on the wall of the school showing how much money had been raised and how much more was needed. Prizes were given for selling varying amounts. And in 2004, one former student told me that she still had a tiny glass perfume bottle that she'd won as a prize. There was even a selling rhyme that was chanted by the children that went like this: sell some salt, sell some salt, sell some every day. If you want to win a prize, that's the only way. Very soon after the letters were sent to the ministers of foreign affairs, dolls started arriving from around the world. Every Friday, there was an assembly program at the school, and when a doll was received, George Cooper would show the doll at the assembly, talk about the country, and show a film. Classes would then write thank you letters to send to the school that had given them the doll. The dolls were displayed in the front hallway near the principal's office, and several former students remembered marching in lines past the cases as they changed classes or moved to other parts of the school. Apparently, George Cooper was a master woodworker, and he often made benches and bookcases for the schools in which he served, and apparently made display cases to house the dolls at the school. The collection of dolls at number 43 school soon became known outside the school. A former student remembered that there were field trips from other schools to see the dolls, and that there was someone who traveled upon occasion with the dolls outside the city. The dolls that were received from other countries came from several sources. In some cases, the initial letter to the Minister of Foreign Affairs was passed on to a school or other organization. In other cases, a doll was sent by the ministry or another government office. And sometimes an individual supplied the doll. One of the first dolls received by the school was this doll from Portugal, which arrived in February 1936. The letter from Cooper to the Minister of Foreign Affairs had been passed on to the National Council of Tourism in the Ministry of the Interior, whose director informed the principal in a December 1935 letter that they were sending a doll, quote, dressed in a costume from our province of Minho and a Portuguese flag. Minho was a province in northern Portugal. In April, thank you letters written by the 6th and 7th grade students at number 43 were sent to Portugal to the children of that province. In the purse of the doll is a Portuguese coin, which, according to a story handed down through the children's room staff, had been provided in case she became homesick and wanted to buy a ticket home. This doll is also an example of the wonderful detail that can be found in the clothing of many of the dolls, much of it handmade. Here's another example of the detail found in many of these dolls. This boy was received from Germany in March of 1936. He's dressed in the clothing of a boy from the Black Forest, and he's complete down to his waistcoat and his watch chain. The original collection contains one animal member, this koala bear from Australia. The secretary of the Minister for External Affairs in Australia wrote that, quote, the minister felt that the best token of our goodwill and interest in your work would be a koala bear doll. The koala or native bear is indigenous to Australia, and its lovable quaintness and friendliness have established it as an unusual favorite. Koala bears are especially favored by children in Australia, and the one which has been sent to you is life-size. Most countries sent one doll, but a few sent multiple dolls. Belgium was one such country, and they're really quite extraordinary. The school's initial letter was passed on to the Principal Inspector of Professional Education at the Belgian Ministry of Economics, who arranged to have a group of dolls sent from the Bischofsheim School of Brussels, complete with a wooden platform containing photographs of the royal family. Enclosed with the dolls was this letter. Dear American schoolmates, the pupils of the Bischofsheim School of Brussels have much pleasure in sending a doll to the Belgian pupils of the Roosevelt School. As our country has no distinctive national costume, we have copied from a portrait by Winterhalter a dress worn about the year 1830 by Queen Louise Marie, first Queen of the Belgians. We have given our preference to this noble representative of our country so as to show you our deep attachment to the royal family. The scarf that you see on the dress is real Brussels lace, so much valued all over the world. The students of the two other professional schools of Brussels, the Funk School and the Couvreur School, and those of the technical schools of Antwerp, Liège, and Bruges have dressed the dolls representing some types symbolizing the principal regions of our country. We hope the Belgian pupils of the Roosevelt School will be pleased with our presence. All the students of the above-mentioned technical schools join in sending to their Belgian friends overseas their most hearty and friendly greetings. In the center of the grouping is the Queen, and she also came with this reproduction of that portrait of the Queen by Winterhalter, on which the unusual thing about this doll is that she's made of wax. Also included in the set are a peasant boy and girl from the province of Antwerp, a lace worker of Bruges and West Flanders, a milkwoman and a peasant from the province of Brabant, and a woman coal seller from the province of Liège. The collection also contains multiple dolls from France. This bride doll had a short detour on her way to number 43 school. She was dressed by the students of the public school of Carnival in Brittany, the Brittany region of France. And this is a bride's dress from that area from 1936. And apparently the cap and the collar were handmade. In August 1936, she was sent by the French Foreign Office in Paris to the French consulate in New York City with the instructions that she was for, quote, the Theodore Roosevelt School, New York, unquote. Perhaps not surprisingly, the consulate assumed from this somewhat vague phrasing that it was intended for the Theodore Roosevelt School in New York City. They notified the New York City school that the consulate had a doll for them, and it was picked up by a representative of the school who was probably quite surprised at this unexpected gift. Now, the French Foreign Office had informed Cooper in October that a doll was being sent for him to the consulate, and when he inquired about it, the error was discovered. The doll was retrieved from the Theodore Roosevelt School in New York City and sent on her way to Rochester. A doll from number 43 school was sent to the students at the school in Carnival through the French consul in New York City. She traveled via the diplomatic pouch on board the French ocean liner SS Normandy, which sailed for France in December. The other French dolls in the collection are 7 dolls representing the former 7 provinces of France. This is the doll from the province of Normandy. These dolls were a gift to the collection from a former teacher at number 43 school who was traveling in Europe at the time. Another doll that had trouble reaching its destination was the doll that was sent from number 43 school in exchange for this doll from the Soviet Union. The school's request for a doll from the USSR had been referred to the USSR Society for Cultural Relations with Foreign Countries, who sent this very large doll dressed in a national costume. She's actually 3 feet tall. But when the Theodore Roosevelt School sent back a doll, their doll was refused entry into the Soviet Union and returned to them. This is the mailing label from the package, which Cooper kept in his files. And you'll note that the package was sent from the Rochester department store, Sibley, Lindsay, and Kerr. Apparently, Cooper had arranged for Sibley's to send the Shirley Temple dolls from number 43 school to countries around the world. They made a second attempt to send a doll to the Soviet Union, and this time through the Consulate General of the USSR in New York City, and that time it was successful. Later, Cooper purchased a grouping of 3 smaller Russian dolls from a store in New York City to add to the collection. These are 2 of them. Cooper made a number of purchases to expand our collection, and in some instances to provide dolls from countries that had not responded to his letters. The former number 43 school teacher who'd given the dolls representing the 7 provinces of France also wrote to Cooper in May of 1938 to tell him about the wonderful but very expensive dolls she had seen in Milan, Italy, made by the Lenci Doll Company, who were noted Italian doll makers. And in June, he placed an order with the Lenci Doll Company for this doll, which cost him $20, which according to the chart I looked up said that that would be about $400 in today's dollars. I don't know where the money came from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was from Cooper himself. The bodies of Lenchi dolls were made of felt, and they have very appealing faces. The George Cooper doll collection contains several Lenchi dolls. This one, with her very elaborate hat and dress, has always been one of the most popular dolls in the collection. But it also contains this Lenchi doll. It came with the collection of the library in 1940 from the school, but there was no information as to its source. According to one document in the files, there was a doll received from Italy in December 1936, and this may be it. This young man was another Lenchi doll, which was a later gift to the library. A very different felt doll was this one from the country of Iraq. The school received 2 dolls like this. Their request was referred to the girls' primary school, which was attached to the girls' training college in Baghdad, and the children of the school prepared these dolls. One of the interesting things about the collection is the variety of materials from which the dolls are made. They're dolls made of bisque, composition, wax, felt, cloth, leather, and wood. In general, the school did not write to colonies, but apparently the initial November 1935 letter was sent to Mozambique, which was a Portuguese colony. The letter was returned from Mozambique, and Cooper made a note that Mozambique was under the protection of Portugal. But in 1937, he tried again, sending a letter to the Department of Education in Mozambique requesting a doll to add to the school's collection. And in response, the Minister of Public Instruction replied that he was sending, quote, a doll made by a native who never attended school, one by a native in elementary school, and 2 made by students who attended schools of art and science. It's unclear which of them made this wooden figure, but it's one of the more unusual dolls in the collection. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lima, Peru, sent this doll, who represents a woman from the mountains. Her body is made out of leather. Often, along with the dolls came pamphlets and other information about the country, and such was the case with this particular doll. Cooper's request to Cuba, asking for a doll from that country, made its way to the head of the Cultural Bureau, and a small article appeared in a Havana newspaper about his request. In part, the article said, the principal of the school from North America explained in his letter that he had pupils of many nationalities, and he uses this plan of instruction to acquaint them with dolls that children play with in every country in the world, and therefore wants a Cuban doll sent to him. Catalina Reinhardt, who was a resident of Havana, saw the article and wrote to Cooper to say that she was a teacher of languages, but in her leisure hours made dolls. And she told him she was sending a Cuban farmer doll and hoped he would be pleased with it. There was no response from the head of the Cultural Bureau. George Cooper spent a great deal of time gathering this collection of dolls from around the world. He was nothing if not persistent. If there had been no response to his initial November 1935 letter proposing the doll exchange, he sent follow-up letters in January 1936 asking again. If the Ministry of Foreign Affairs informed him that his request was being sent on to a different department or a particular school and nothing had been received, he followed up with a letter to the ministry and to the department or the school. And he always sent a thank you letter after receiving a doll or dolls, including a final thank you letter in October 1937 to all the places that had participated. Now, Canada and England were not among the countries that received the original letter in November 1935. But in October 1937, Cooper wrote to the Commissioner of Public Instruction in both Canada and England, describing the collection and explaining that, quote, we have not communicated with your country for the simple reason that the costumes are practically the same. But all the people, children and pupils that have viewed the dolls have repeatedly said, well, where are the dolls from Canada and England? And in response to his letter, an English doll was sent from the Wolverton Girls' School in Wolverton, England. And from a former teacher living in England came this gift of a Buckingham Palace guard. The response from Canada was that, quote, there really is no difference between the dolls Canadian children and the children the United States use. Cooper replied that he realized that there exists a similarity between the dolls of the two countries, but the thought that is foremost here at Theodore Roosevelt School is a doll from Canada. Just a short while ago, we received a doll from England, dressed in the attire of a guard of Buckingham Palace. I wonder if I might suggest a doll from Canada, dressed as one of your royal mounties. And in the collection are two royal mounties, like this one. The Irish doll, from what was then called the Irish Free State, was sent by the conductors and pupils of the Convent of Mercy National School in Dublin. And along with her came a display card to be used in the doll Roosevelt School. It's beautifully written in Gaelic with illuminated letters, very much in the tradition of the ancient Irish manuscripts created by the monks, and also came with a translation into English. Now, apparently James Wilson, who was Scottish, and in Cooper's words, one of the men at the school who take care of the heating and upkeep, was very interested in the doll collection, and not seeing one from his country, Scotland, suggested that the principal write to a merchant in his hometown of Airdrie, Scotland, which is east of Glasgow. Cooper did so, and Andrew T. Little, president of the local Merchants Association, sent this doll. I was interested to see the letterhead of Mr. Little's business stationery. It describes his business as ladies and gentlemen's outfitting, corset specialist, and general draper. In 1937, Cooper received a letter from the Administrative Affairs section in Montevideo, Uruguay, informing him that through the Uruguayan consulate in New York City, the school would be receiving a doll, a trousseau, and various articles of clothing, all prepared by the State Industrial School. Well, this brief description hardly prepared them for what arrived. This doll, dressed in the typical national costume from the interior of the country, arrived with a wooden wardrobe filled with clothes. The wardrobe, which contained two bevel shirts, had been made by the teacher of manual training, the collaboration of students who took the course, and inside were 3 dresses, an apron, 3 shirts or blouses, 1 trousers, 1 pair of panties, 2 petticoats, a shawl, a coat, and 2 handkerchiefs. And several of the items were trimmed with hand crocheted lace, and others included hand embroidery. Another example of amazing handwork by young people is found on the dolls from New Zealand. They represent 2 Maori, the native people of New Zealand, and they were dressed by the pupils from several native schools in New Zealand. This is the larger of the 3 dolls, and on her back, she wears a cape made out of feathers. Some of my favorite dolls in the collection are a group representing Guatemala. It appears from the correspondence files that there was no response to Cooper's several letters to Guatemala. However, when the library received the collection in 1940, there were 8 figures from that country. 6 dolls had been gifts from Mrs. Paul Hogan, a former teacher and friend of Cooper's, who lived in Venezuela, and 2 larger ones that were either gifts or were purchased by Cooper. They're not particularly sophisticated dolls, but I find them especially appealing. The woman weaving is using a backstrap loom. And this fellow is my favorite. He's a peddler with a pack full of items to sell. Now, in contrast to the tiny size of these Guatemalan figures is this one from Nicaragua. She is 29 inches tall and quite imposing. As the letter from the Minister of Public Education explained, she is, quote, a little larger than those regularly made for children in Nicaragua. Another interesting doll from Central America is this one from El Salvador. The school's request for a doll was referred to the Secretary of Public Instruction, and this is the doll they received. She has a very expressive face, and her head appears to be made of felt with painted features. In all, a little over 50 countries exchanged dolls with number 43 school. Despite several follow-up letters from Cooper, there was no response at all from about 14 countries that had been contacted. A couple of places, Morocco and Sudan, responded that their children didn't play with dolls. Both of them were Islamic countries. A few ministries informed Cooper that they were passing on his invitation to participate in the doll exchange to schools or other organizations, but nothing came of it, despite follow-up letters from Mr. Cooper. But of all the countries that did send dolls, none compared with those sent by Japan. Not only did they send multiple dolls, but the dolls were also of extraordinary quality. The first letter from number 43 school was sent to Japan on November 7th, 1935, along with the initial letters to other countries. In January 1936, when no response had been received from some of the countries, including Japan, Cooper sent follow-up letters. And in March, he received a letter from the General Secretary of the Society for International Cultural Relations in Tokyo, to whom the Minister of Foreign Affairs had referred his two letters. The secretary apologized that no response had been sent earlier, and he went on to say, two of the very best dolls obtainable are being especially made at the present time, a boy doll and a girl doll. Dyers and tailors are busily engaged in making their outfit perfect in every detail. The dolls will be ready for shipment by the first part of April. At the same time, we shall send various pictures and materials showing intimate glimpses of the life of school children in Japan. The latter material will be sent to the pupils of your school by the children attending the practice teaching school connected with the Tokyo Women's Higher Normal College. In return, they will be happy to receive dolls and other materials from America. Hoping that these may be of some assistance in your interesting and worthy work, I remain yours very truly. In May, the General Secretary again wrote Cooper to tell him that the dolls were being shipped from Yokohama to New York City and would be delivered through the Japanese consulate in that city. The shipment was in 3 large cases, which contained a large boy and girl doll, small boy and girl doll, photographs depicting school life in Japan, and various handicrafts made by the manual training classes and art classes in the primary school attached to the Tokyo Women's Higher Normal School. These are the 2 large boy and girl dolls who stand about 42 inches high. In his May letter, the General Secretary described these 2 dolls this way. They belong to the Yamato Neo type and are one of the large variety of different makes of dolls. From head to foot, they are handmade, hand-carved, painted, and dressed. The designs on the clothes were drawn on white silk brocade and dyed with great care. These dolls were made under the personal supervision of Japan's leading doll maker and are perfect in every way. They are dressed in holiday attire. And both of them came with their own individual display cases. Here are the 2 smaller dolls that were sent, and of them he said, the 2 little dolls are of a new variety with movable limbs and can sit on the floor in pure Japanese fashion. These dolls are dressed in everyday clothes. And here's a close-up of the smaller boy. The General Secretary ended his letter by saying, hoping that the children of your school will like the dolls and pictures, and that this may lead to a better and more friendly understanding between the children of our 2 countries. I remain yours very sincerely. In April 1937, before the Japanese dolls and other items were packed for shipment from Tokyo, a farewell ceremony was held in the auditorium of the Tokyo Women's Higher Normal School by the primary school children attached to it. In attendance were the American ambassador to Japan and the chairman of the board of directors of the Society for International Cultural Relations, which had helped to arrange the contact with the school. And you can see up on the stage the 4 dolls, the 2 large boy and girl dolls in their own display cases, and the 2 smaller dolls as well. George Cooper received a letter from the principal of the normal school who wrote, the sending of these dolls has been indeed a rich international experience for the children of our school. I sincerely trust that this may be the beginning of mutually interesting and friendly relations between the children of our two schools. Handicrafts made by the manual training and art classes at the school and sent with the dolls included, among other things, paper dolls, a kite, handkerchiefs, a pin cushion, an abacus bag, brush writings, and drawings. A letter from the students describing their school and daily activities began this way. If we cross just one ocean, we can see each other, can't we? Teacher says that we are becoming closer and closer. Isn't that wonderful? Please come and visit Japan, the land where blossoms blow, and we shall be waiting to meet you under the cherries. We should all love to go to your country, but we can't. So in our place, we are sending you these dolls. Their names are Master Hideo Yamato, Sunrise Japan, and Miss Haruko Sakuraji, Spring Cherry Tree. Please be kind to them, won't you? When the 3 cases containing the dolls and other items arrived in New York City, they were opened and examined by Kenichi Morowake, who was with the Japanese consulate and was the New York correspondent for the Society for International Cultural Relations. He wanted to verify that there was no damage before he had them sent on to Rochester. He described the great care that had been taken in packing the dolls. They had been placed in a paper box wrapped with a waterproof cover and encased in a wooden box over which was an airtight tin cover. And finally, they had been placed in a heavy wooden case. He cautioned Cooper that care should be taken in opening the cases so as not to accidentally damage the dolls. Since the cases arrived in Rochester during the summer, they were held unopened until school started in September. And once the school saw what had been sent, they decided to hold a special program on the afternoon of October 27, 1937, to honor the birthday of Theodore Roosevelt, their school's namesake, and to show their appreciation and goodwill to our friends from Japan for their extraordinary gifts. Unfortunately, there are no photographs from that occasion, but it must have been an impressive one. Invited guests included teachers, principals, and officials from the Rochester School District, business leaders, Congressman James Duffy, and other Rochesterians. The Japanese dolls were on a rostrum in front of the auditorium. The program opened with a singing of the national anthem and included the performance of a shadow play called Scenes of Japan. There were greetings to Princess Cherry Blossom and Prince Sunrise Japan, presentation of the dolls by Mr. Kenichi Morowake from New York, and the acceptance on behalf of the school by the standard bearer of Theodore Roosevelt School. In his remarks, Mr. Morowake noted, in international relations, agreements and understanding between governments are indeed important, but a matter of far greater importance is understanding and goodwill among the peoples themselves, which is a lasting basis of international friendship and cooperation. In this respect, I cannot commend your school too highly for taking the initiative in the exchange of dolls and children's handiwork in order to foster mutual appreciation of one another's customs and culture. A former student that we talked to in 1990 remembered this program. The 2 best students in the 8th grade were designated as the custodian and the standard bearer of the flag. She was the custodian, and she had a few lines to say to Mr. Morowake, but she remembered that she flubbed her lines and she was horribly embarrassed. However, he gave her his autograph, which she still had many years later. In November, at the request of Julia Sauer, who was head of the Work with Children for the Rochester Public Library, the 2 large dolls were displayed for 2.5 weeks at the library's brand new Rundle Memorial Building, which had just opened that fall. This visit may have been what planted the seed for the eventual donation of the entire doll collection to the library in 1940. Now, naturally, Theodore Roosevelt School felt they needed to send something more than just their one customary Shirley Temple doll to Japan in exchange for such an impressive gift. Cooper enlisted the help of other schools in the school district, and in April 1937, a collection of 4 dolls and other items sailed from New York City for Tokyo. And this photograph shows the 4 dolls. The baby doll, Rosemarie Fitzhugh, on the left, was clothed by girls at William Fitzhugh School number 6. Next to the baby doll is Shirley Ann Monroe, dressed by members of the Junior Red Cross chapter at Monroe High School. The boy in the center is Thomas Jefferson, dressed as a typical American schoolboy in clothes made by girls in the home economics department at Jefferson High School. And on the right is Shirley Temple, who was sent with a sunsuit, a play dress, pajamas, bathrobe, and a party dress. And in addition to the dolls, the school sent several handcrafted items by the students, picture postcards of Rochester, photographs of school activities, and 34 books on the topic of education written by educators in the Rochester area. There were also letters to the children of the primary school in Tokyo from Charles Stanton, the mayor of Rochester, and James Spinning, superintendent of schools. To pack and ship everything, Cooper appealed to the Eastman Kodak Company, and they very generously sent the collection to their offices in Tokyo, which helped to deliver it to the primary school. In June, the dolls from 43 School arrived in Tokyo, and there was a presentation ceremony held at the school. Attendees included students from the American School in Tokyo. David Pyle, the private secretary to the American ambassador, made the presentation of the dolls, books, and other tokens of goodwill from Theodore Roosevelt and other Rochester schools. The principal of the normal school spoke, as did the managing director of the Society for International Cultural Relations. There were speeches by a primary school girl and boy and a higher primary girl school in English. And in it, she expressed the hope that the lovely 4 dolls would get on well with us and be our friends forever. Chorus sang a doll song. There were 2 plays about dolls. The American National Anthem was played by the school's harmonica band and then sung by the students of the American School in Tokyo. Thank you notes were written by several of the Tokyo students. This one is the note, which was written by a 6th grade boy, expressing a wish for peace between our 2 countries, which are neighbors across the ocean. And this is the back of the little pamphlet. This one was written by a 5th grade girl. She says that she thinks the dolls are cute, and though she's not met any Americans, she imagines that they're cute too. The person who translated this for us in 1978 said that her penmanship was particularly fine and not often found today. In 1940, the Theodore Roosevelt School number 43 donated their collection of dolls to the Rochester Public Library. The poignancy of this collection, gathered with a spirit of goodwill from countries now at war, did not escape Julia Sauer, head of the library's work with children. In a press release announcing a special display of the dolls at the library in September 1942, she included these words: "No thinking adult can look at these little dolls without wondering what has been the fate of the children in the European countries who sent them. It is true that they were not the beloved possessions of individual children, but somewhere in a school or institution, each doll was selected and sent off by a happy group of children. Dolls from the other hemisphere left their homelands in happier times. Today, like many of the children who sent them, they represent countries clouded by war or are refugees without a country at all." Initially, only a few of the dolls were regularly on display in the children's room, as the library did not have cases to display the entire collection permanently. But usually once or twice a year, tables would be set up in the secret room and all the dolls would be exhibited in the room for about a month, with a staff person on duty to answer questions and ensure the safety of the collection. By the 1960s, the library finally had enough cases to display most of the collection on a permanent basis in the secret room. And in 1997, when the Children's Department moved to the new Bausch and Lomb Public Library building across the street, the dolls were moved to the new secret room there, where they were displayed in new cases made from some of the old card catalog cabinets from the Rundle Library building. The same cases being used today to display them in the Arts and Literature division. In 2022, the secret room in the Bausch and Lomb building in the Children's Department was redesigned. And at that time, the dolls moved to the Arts and Literature division on the first floor of the Rundle building, where you can see them today. Some of the dolls came to the library with proper names, others did not. And in 1941, and again in 1944, the children's room held naming contests in which children could vote for their favorite names. Among others, the Lenci boy doll from Italy became Antonio. The Lenci girl doll with the blue dress and the flowered hat was named Marietta. The Buckingham Palace Guard was christened George, and the Highland Lassie from Scotland became known as Janet. Since the library received the dolls in 1940, there have been additions to the collection, and it has grown from the initial 167 dolls to 259. From a library staff member came this unusual doll representing the Philippines, made entirely of shells. A Laotian refugee who visited the collection in 1983 noticed that it contained no dolls from his country, and he presented these two to the library. In general, number 43 school sent letters only to countries of the world, not to colonies. And for that reason, there are very few dolls from the continent of Africa, since much of Africa in the 1930s was made up of European colonies and not independent countries. This is one of 2 Bantu items that were received from the country of South Africa. Also sent was this basket woven by a 12-year-old boy from Cornhusk. Thanks to later gifts in the collection, there are now several dolls representing Africa. This doll is from the country of Kenya in East Africa. This one's from Senegal in West Africa. And this one represents the general region of West Africa. The George W. Cooper doll collection has given much pleasure to thousands of children and adults since it was begun in 1935 as a window on the ethnic and cultural diversity of the world. It was developed to promote goodwill and understanding among the children of the world gathered during a time when the world seemed tragically lacking in both. We now live in a much more global world, but the spirit of international goodwill and understanding are no less needed now than they were then. I think George Cooper would be proud to know that this collection continues to promote those values to today's children. Thank you very much. Let me take my slides off here. And I would be happy to answer questions if I can, that anyone might have.
Hi, Barbara. I have one.
Hi, Maureen.
When I was working down there, the boy Japanese doll was never out because there was some repair problem with it. Has that been taken care of?
Yes.
Since the many years I haven't been there.
He was damaged, and for a very long time we were not able to have him on display. We were very fortunate. This was before I retired in 2010, to have a man from Japan who is a doll repairer who came to Rochester, learned about the doll and came to Rochester and offered to repair the doll without charging us anything. I mean, we were just stunned. It was an extremely generous thing for him to do. And I was there while he was working on it. It was the joint in the boy's leg had come apart and was damaged. And he took the kimono off, which I couldn't imagine. It made me nervous watching him, and he knew what he was doing. But it was lovely. So he did repair it, and we were able to put it back on display again. So yeah, there were a number of dolls. I mean, this is a very old collection, and I think that all the dolls probably were in fine shape when they came in 1940. But over the years, there was just some disintegration of them and some damage that happened. So there were a number of dolls that we were not able to display because they were damaged, and that's still true. No.
Yeah, I saw some of my favorites in your presentation. Oh, I remember that one. I remember that one. Thank you.
Anything else anybody wants to ask? If you have not seen the collection, I would urge you to visit the Arts and Literature Division in the Rundle Building and take a look at them. They're not able to have all of the dolls on display, but there are, I think probably about 2/3 of the dolls are on display, and it's quite an amazing collection.
It is, and we're very happy to have them in our area now. One of the librarians, Melissa Manzik, that I work with, she made a wonderful binder with she photographed all the dolls, and she put them in this binder. And you're welcome to come in and look at this binder. Of course, you prefer to see the dolls in person, but if you did need to photocopy something or get some more information from this binder, you're welcome to do that.
So these dolls are available to see in the Rundell Museum in Rochester?
They are in the Rundell Central Library at the corner of South and Broad Street on
Okay,
the first floor.
Anything else anybody's wondering about? I was always sorry that I was never able, I almost was able to meet Mr. Cooper and missed out. He was, when he was quite elderly. His son had planned to visit to the library for him to see the dolls, which he had not seen in many, 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 many years. Unfortunately, he was not able to make that visit. And I was always very sorry about that because I had lots of questions I would have liked to have asked him about the collection. What I know about the collection is what was handed down through the Children's Center staff and from the original correspondence and information that was in the files of the Children's Center, which is still with the library. I believe that material is in the local history division now. So.
will we be able to view this recording again?
Yes, I'll send it to all of you.
That would be great, because unfortunately I missed the first few minutes, so I'd like to see it.
Sure, it's recording now and from the beginning, and I will send that link to everyone.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, this is Cynthia Dana. I work at the Central Library, and hi, Barbara.
Hi, Cynthia.
I love the story about the Japanese dolls. I did not know all of that, and it was quite touching how careful they were with what they wanted to send, and those dolls are beautiful. And I was fortunate enough to help Nancy and Melissa transfer the dolls over to Rundell, and I think they did most of the work, but I was very happy to be able to see some of the dolls, and we were careful and wore gloves and handled them very carefully, but I think they look great where they are now. So if you get a chance, you should come down and see them. Yeah,
it's kind of nerve-wracking to transport them. When the children's department moved from the Rundell building to the new library building across the street, in addition to, because the staff did lots of moving of all kinds of stuff at the library. And so there was lots of book moving, but we also, the Children's Center staff, personally moved all the dolls, and we were all kind of nervous about that. But everything, they managed to get over to the other building fairly safely. So I can imagine your feeling about when you were bringing them back over to the Rundell building again.
Yes. It was quite a production, but it's a beautiful collection, and I love all these stories, Barbara. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. You know so much about this collection, something that Melissa and I, we don't have this background and history with them. So it's really great to hear you speak about them.
I think it's an interesting story. And I think as I said, I think what's striking about it is the time at which it took place. I mean, this was all about friendship. This was all about reaching out to people and children specifically, but people in other countries in friendship at a time when that was not what the world was about. And I think that was really special. I'm not sure where the idea of the doll exchange actually came from. Some of you may be aware that in 1927, there was a doll exchange program between Japan and the United States. And it may be that that was the inspiration, that it may be that George Cooper knew about that and thought, oh, this might be something we could do, but we would broaden it to all the countries around the world. I think he, as I say, I'm sorry that I never met him, because I think he was a very dedicated educator, and cared a lot about his students and about what he could bring to them through his efforts. So thank you for listening to this story. And-
Barbara?
Yeah.
Barbara, I have
Great.
one more question. Was it 1990 when you interviewed the former students? Was that the year that we did the, what was it, UJO?
No,
The other exchange
no.
doll contest?
1990, in 1990, which was the 50th anniversary of the library receiving the dolls, the children's department decided that we wanted to do something to observe that anniversary. So we had a series of programs, and we did some exhibits, and we had an event for teachers and students, anybody who had been at 43 School at that time. And we advertised in a lot of different ways. There were not a lot of people that we were able to contact. I suspect there were other people in Rochester who just never heard about it. But there were a number of actually former teachers and students who we had a gathering, and it was really interesting hearing their stories. And as I say, we learned things that we had not known before. The UJO project was something different.
It was much earlier. It was in the 80s, now that I think about it.
Yeah, right. I think
Yeah.
it was. I'm
Yeah.
forgetting my dates.
Well, I
here.
know I was at Maplewood, so it was in the 80s.
I mentioned that there was this 1927 doll exchange program between Japan and the United States. Of friendship dolls. And Japan sent dolls that they were all girl dolls, but they were the size of our large boy and girl doll. And made, as I recall, by the same doll maker. I think there were about 20 or 30 of them, maybe. I've forgotten exactly how many. They were sent to the United States, different states throughout the country. In 1979, I should say, one of those dolls was sent to Rochester. The Rochester Museum and Science Center has that doll.
Okay.
Although for many years, there was a confusion about which doll it was. I mean, they knew all the dolls that had been sent from Japan, each of whom had their own name. And the doll that the Rochester Museum and Science Center has was confused with another doll. There's a whole lot of confusion about Japanese dolls. But in 1979, there was a woman from Japan who came to Rochester to visit this doll that the museum had. And she brought some of the American dolls that had been sent to Japan, and they were on display at the Rochester Museum and Science Center. She also brought with her a lot of other things. One of the things were handmade dolls, had been made by children, Japanese children. And he wanted these to be given to American children. And the library ended up being connected with her. I won't go into how we got the connection, but so the Monroe County Library System developed a, I'm going to say a program in which we invited schools throughout Monroe County to submit handmade books about friendship and or Japan, United States. And we selected, I forget how many dolls there were now, or how many handmade dolls she had brought with her, but made by Japanese children. But we selected enough winners of the best books, and the classroom that had made that doll, the handmade doll, then got one of these Japanese dolls and the opportunity to communicate with the students in Japan. It was a wonderful program, and we had marvelous books that these classes submitted. Some of them were just amazing. But that was in relation to this 1927 exchange. It had nothing to do with the doll exchange that the library's dolls were related to. So, which is one reason why everything was very confusing for a long time between the dolls that the museum had and the dolls that we had. And I began learning about all of this stuff because we were getting questions from people and communications from people in Japan and newspaper people who had called us, and we were trying to sort out what dolls are you talking about, and I never heard about this before. So it was very confusing. So I think I've sort of sorted it out now.
Barbara, I thought I heard at one time that there was a visitor from Australia who was not happy that they were represented by a koala bear. Is that true?
I don't know. I hadn't heard that. I suppose that could be very well true. Yeah, right.
Yes, it is true, Cynthia.
Okay.
Is this somebody recent?
They contacted a friend of theirs in Australia, I believe, and they sent a new doll, which is also in the case.
Okay.
Yes.
And can I say, this is Glenys Abrahams, and I'm tuned in from Australia. That was me. So I was visiting David and Claudia Weber, and they brought me to the collection, and I was just amazed by all these beautiful dolls and the intricacy of the clothing. And I was quite excited to see, well, what did Australia send? And when I saw this koala, I went, oh my gosh, I laughed. I thought, okay, all right. And I was looking for something that was more in keeping of the doll collection. So I was able to source 2 dolls in Aboriginal dress, and I have forwarded them to the library. But I want to thank you for putting that koala into context as to why Australia sent a koala. It now makes sense. But now you've got a koala and 2 dolls, in Aboriginal costumes.
That's great. And I have seen the Australian dolls that you gave. So that's great to have them. I mean, I do think one of the things that is interesting is to look at what these countries chose to send. I mean, even within dolls, I mean, that some are very sophisticated and others are not. I think that's one of the interesting things about it. And the fact that Australia sent a koala bear. I think that was interesting too. I will tell you that in my years in the Children's Center with this collection, children really enjoyed seeing the koala bear. He was quite popular. But I'm glad that there is now something other than an animal to represent Australia. So thank you for that gift.
Yeah, and thank you for including the dolls too. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. And I hope all of you, if you have not already, had a chance to visit and take a look at the collection.
Yes, thank you so much, Barbara. This was a great discussion. I was so worried at the beginning that it wasn't going to happen because of my internet outage, but I'm very happy it took place and I learned a lot. And I want to thank all of you for coming too. And please do stop in and see this beautiful collection. Barbara's slides are wonderful, but to see them in person and the detail on the clothing is just amazing. I make doll clothes and I am just astounded by the level of detail in these clothes. So thank you again for coming. And I will send everybody the link to the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you all have a good night.
You too. Thanks again for the presentation.
Sure. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.